All right, another hand history while I'm here freezing at the football field before my fingers snap off. Let's get to the pre-flop action. All right, let's get started. A player limped. I raised to 15 with aces. A player behind me called, and the limper called. So there's one player behind, one player in front, three-handed, going to the flop. All right, pre-flop action, unbelievably standard. Let's get to the flop turn, and kind of river, where things actually happen this hand. All right, left you off here. Flop, $45 in there. King 10-5, two spades. The 5 is the card that is not the spade, and the action was the player in front checked. I c-bet $20 for value. The player behind me called, and the player in front check called. So everyone's in, three-handed still, going to the turn. So the thing to talk about on the flop is the sizing. I went slightly less than half pot. I'm multi-way, and the board is pretty wet, so I'm definitely betting for value. There's a ton of worse hands that I'll call. But there are so many runouts that I hate. I don't love cards that complete the straight. I don't love cards that complete the flush. I don't love if the king pairs. I don't love if the 10 pairs. The 5 wouldn't stop me from betting, but I would still not love it because the 5 is the card on the flop that's not the spade. So any 5x of spades, definitely not folding on the flop. It's not really tons of runouts that I like. So I'm betting for value, but I'm aware that there are a lot of hands, a lot of runouts where draws get completed or like trips get made and a raise comes in behind me and I end up folding, so no reason to go overboard. If it were like heads up on a drier board or heads up at all or just a drier board altogether, I could definitely go bigger, and I probably would. Multi-way on this wet of a board where like half the deck is a card on the turn I don't like, no reason to go overboard with the sizing, so I bet 20 into 45. On to the turn. Okay, on the turn, about $100 in there. Turn card is a non-spade 9, and the first player checked again. I bet for value again, $50. I got raised to $100. The player in front cold called this raise, and I folded, leaving the two of them heads up, going to the river. This is interesting. So that 9 hits on the turn, and in my notes I have here that before action was on me on the turn, but after the turn card hit the board, I said to myself in my head, sets are raising on the flop, I'm not worried about them. King 10 is raising on the flop, I'm not worried about them. 5x of spades just calls. The only hand that will raise me on the turn is Queen Jack. You could probably see King 9 doing it also. A king, you know, definitely King 9 calls free. A king calls on the flop, average kicker, and then hits 2 pair. Guess I could see 10-9 doing it also. So yeah, didn't love the 9, although it's not going to stop me from trying to get value because there are still hands like King Jack, King Queen, Queen 10, Jack 10, like pairs on the flop that are now pairs in a draw on the turn. Also 5x of spades or any spades still have the spade draw. So there's still value to get, although the 9 isn't an amazing card. So there was the check, then I bet, and then I got min raised. The guy in front cold called, which is probably some kind of a draw. It's the smallest the raise could be. It's not that the odds are bad, just the fact that I got raised. Can't see like King Queen not raising the flop, but now raising the turn when, okay, you picked up a gut shot, but like that's really not a ton. Just didn't make sense for me to be ahead of his hands that go flat pre, or call pre-flop, call flop, raise turn. So the sizing is small, but just the fact that there was a raise was worrying me. I gave it up, expecting the guy behind me to have a straight and expecting the guy in front to have some kind of a draw. Onto the river. Not that I was even involved in the river, but I was at the table and I saw it. Okay, I wasn't involved in the river, but here's the river action. River, about $350 in there. The board paired 9s, but still not a spade. The action went check. The player in position bet 100 again, just like on the turn. The player in front check called. They showed down. The player in position had Queen Jack for the King High straight. He turned the nuts, and the player in front had King Jack. A pair on the flop, a pair, and a gut shot on the turn. All right, so I wasn't involved on the river, but you saw what happened. Check bet 100, and yeah, panned like what I thought. The guy behind who raised the turn, even though the sizing wasn't big, he raised the turn, he turned the straight, and the guy in front had a pair and a draw. The sizing was interesting. I always wondered if on the river, when the guy in position kept the sizing the same at 100, if he was doing it to try to like milk everything he could, because the pot was just getting very big and the guy in front seemed kind of weak, or if he was just scared that he didn't have the nuts anymore, like a lot of people were doing in 2016 in Vegas, because the board paired 9s, so he loses to boats. I wonder if the card, if the river were an 8, would the bet have been a lot bigger. But either way, I had a plan for the hand. It was wet, it was multi-way, so I still wanted to bet for value, but kept the sizing in check. Didn't go overboard on the flop, didn't go overboard on the turn, and then the action more than the sizing on the turn worried me. Got to see showdown. We don't always get to do that. Got to see showdown, and my reads on both players were right. So the guy in front with king, queen, like I said earlier, if I were heads up, the sizing would have been different. If he has like no interest in 3-betting me pre-flop, and then he has just a very quick decision, check call on the flop, check call on the turn, like that's, even though this board were wet, that would have been a nice scenario. Heads up in position against him, and I could bet all 3 streets and size it bigger. But on this wet of a board, 3-way didn't make sense, knowing how many cards on the runouts could mess me up. And remember, rice is a spoon food.